Hello, everybody, and indeed, I'm Tony Val, and this is Hoosier Hometown Heroes. Today, my guest is Danny O'Malia. Danny is actually the first ever repeat guest on Hoosier Hometown Heroes. We had a great time catching up. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure you will, too. Before we go to that, I must thank our sponsor, Prometheus Consulting. If your organization is unhappy with your current IT support, if your staff are not getting the care and attention they deserve, if your computers are running slow, if you're worried about security, call Prometheus today at 317-733-2388. And now please enjoy my conversation with Danny O'Malia. Well, welcome back to Hoosier Hometown Heroes, Danny.
It's great to be back, Tony.
I think where I want to start right away is I believe one day in advance, happy birthday is in order. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. How did you know? Facebook, right?
No. You know, I have it on my calendar.
Well, good for you. Yeah.
And the amazing part of that story is that I actually read my calendar. This is proof. Danny O'Malia's birthday.
There you go. There you go.
So I also want to make the point that so years ago I was on your radio show.
Right.
And you probably don't remember this. You would have no reason to remember. But you back then, we did it 2 weeks in a row. I can't even remember why.
We couldn't cover all the ground in 1 week. That was it. And that's a very rare thing that I can't cover all the ground in 1 week.
Yeah. Well, you said to me on that second week, you said, I want you to know, you said you're the first repeat guest on my radio show.
That's right.
Well, so now I can say to you today, Danny, you are the first repeat guest on Hoosier Hometown Heroes.
Hey, what goes around comes around, right?
Yeah, there's something between us here.
Well, you've been on the show 3 times then.
That's right.
Because we just taped a show not long ago.
Yes, that'll air the 26th, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking forward to that.
So, here's where I wanted to start to get into the heart of kind of our discussion today. So I saw your recent Sparks Talk. And I learned something that I wasn't aware of before, and I just kind of wanted to start there. I did not realize that Joe O'Malia had a kind of trouble starting out, it sounds like. It was not a resounding success right from the beginning.
Well, the O'Malia Food Markets was, but 10 years before that, he opened a store in Broad Ripple. You heard about it in the Sparks Talk. That did not pan out very well for him. But the theme of the Sparks Talks that night was my secret. So that was a secret. Not many people know that Joe failed in his first store, but he never gave up. And that was the theme of my talk, never, ever, ever give up. So though he lost the first store, he put his nose back to the grindstone, went back to work for a couple of other local chains for 9 years and built up more credit with a bank and got more experience and then hit a home run with O'Malia's 10 years later.
So it was about 10 years from his first try to his second. Now, were you at an age where you were kind of affected by that, or did you learn about it later on?
Well, I was 8, 9, 10 years old at the time he opened and lost the first store. And he had me working in there, and I think I told you the story how he used to send me down the street to pick up products that they didn't have room for at a bigger store, a Kroger store. Yep. I was too young to worry about it at the time.
Good.
It seemed to me like, ironically, and it's in the Sparks Talk, as soon as the store failed, he got a call from his old boss who said, "Come back to work for me." And so that happened for a couple of years, and then he had another local chain, and so he was always working. It seemed kind of seamless to me as an 8, 9, 10-year-old until I learned the whole backstory later.
That's good. It's good to to think that you didn't have to worry unduly. Every once in a while, I think as a business owner, as I was telling you before we started taping today, Lewis is 7, and there's a risk to being a business owner. And sometimes we lay our head on the pillow and say, I'm not sure if I can make this sucker run tomorrow,
Yeah.
And it's, I think young kids, you don't want to worry about them worrying. You want to shield them.
My folks did a good job shielding me. I know my dad was worried But he had built up a lot of equity in the local grocery business, both with Kroger and then the chain he worked for in the early 50s. And he had a good reputation around town. And so things started to pick up, and he got 10 years more experience, 10 years more credit with the bank, if you will.
Sure.
And didn't remake the same mistakes the second time. And
yes.
And by the time he opened the next store, and I was in college, and I'd seen his successes in the interim, I wasn't too worried. I was praying just to make sure, but I wasn't too worried about it because I knew he knew what he was doing.
You could see it even back then.
Well,
that's good.
In the Sparks talk, I talked about the store where he was a 1/3 owner in the early 60s. It went from $6,000 a week when they bought it to $50,000 a week a year later, and how everybody,
quite a jump.
the employees, the customers, the vendors, it's all because of the way that man treats people. And at which point I go, everything my dad's taught me is working out.
Yes. Since you're wanting to clear your throat, that gives me the perfect chance for a very verbose question. I can't ask a brief question. I have to I have to meander. But what I wanted to cover next, Danny, is of course I was excited to have you on because I feel like we as a community we have learned so much from you.
Well,
and
thank you.
And so we're going to learn a little bit more today.
Okay, I'll try.
And, well, I don't think it'll be very hard for you. But I have, in the talks that I've seen you give and in talks with you personally, I hear you talk over and over about culture. Can you tell me, and obviously the way you help the indie community now with customer service, of course, it all grows from the O'Malley's story.
That's
so
right.
Can you give us a sense for what was the culture at O'Malley's Supermarkets?
Well, when I say before O'Malley's with the store at 71st and Keystone and the 800% increase in the business and the customers and the employees and the vendors saying it's all Joe O'Malley, that's culture. Culture is what makes a place or a family or a city what it is. And in the case of O'Malley's, my dad started the culture with a running start because he had employees from some of the other stores, the very best employees from Stop and Shop, from Preston's, that had worked with him 5-10 years before, come on board with him. They were already people who agreed with him about customer service and about teamwork and getting along with each other and helping each other out to take care of the customers. So he had kind of a running start from all those years of building those great relationships and being around great people. I told the story about my dad's first employee at O'Malley's was one of his employees at Preston's. Yeah. And when he found out my dad was going to build the store, he had to drive twice as far from home to work every day. But he said, I don't care. I want to work with you. Right? Not for you, with you. Danny Barton, he just died a couple years ago. God bless him.
I read about that recently. I think on your blog.
One of the Star reporters did a big article on Joe O'Malley's first employee passing away, and it was a kind of a milestone.
So that's a good picture of I think the genesis of the culture with O'Malley's. Why should we business owners care? Why should we care so much about culture?
Well,
that's probably a dumb sounding question.
Well, because if you don't, you'll end up not like Nordstrom, Chick-fil-A, Southwest Airlines that still have great cultures, but you'll end up gone or miserable or both. You have to respect your culture and you have to keep tending to your culture. As you grow, you have to add things. It's not as easy to run 8 grocery stores or 9 like we had as it was 1.
I'll bet.
And so you got to keep onboarding good people and not take too many good people out of the stores that you already had and let them go to seed, which was kind of partly what happened to my dad, 10 years prior. You can't grow too fast, and you have to keep respecting the culture. And as you get bigger, you have to work harder because you got more and more people that you need to have understand the culture. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
And the teamwork and the customer service and all of that. Mm-hmm. So when we had a couple of 3 stores, we kind of let the managers hire everybody and train everybody. But by the time we had 6 or 7 stores, we realized, we're missing something in doing that. We need all these people to understand that Joe did fail once, and how hard he worked to get back and how difficult it was in the beginning and so on and so forth, and what each employee means to the success of all the other employees.
Yeah.
And so the new employee orientation helped smooth the rest of the growth. And that was just an example.
Mm-hmm. Did your dad ever get to retire?
Yes and no. He did not really. He wasn't comfortable with retirement, but a combination of health issues. My mom had Alzheimer's, and then by the time she passed, this was in '92, he was really slowing down himself physically, and it took a lot out of him. So he was more or less forced into retirement by his health. If his health had remained good, he never would have retired.
He would have just kept on going, huh?
He would have kept on going.
Yeah. So I want to dive a little deeper now into, the perspective of the business owner, and culture and customer service are so important. Let's get more specific. Every business owner gets a complaint from time to time. How can we see that differently than, or what are most business owners kind of missing when they get a complaint, would you say?
I'm glad you asked about complaints. And in our first interview here, you put my dad's 11 steps to handling complaints up on the screen. You have to teach the employees that a complaint is really an opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons. Abraham Lincoln said the best way to treat an enemy is to make him a friend. And he told me that when he put me in charge of handling complaints, he said, now, you're going to think this is a very hard job, but you use these 11 steps you just wrote down, and within a year or so, you're going to look forward to this because you're going to know it's going to be an opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons and make that customer like us better than he or she did even before we made the mistake, if we made the mistake. And he turned out to be right. It turned out to be a great opportunity the customer was offering us by complaining to us rather than just going to another store. And to be known as the store where you can complain and they'll do something about it, it's got a lot of value to it.
Absolutely. It also, in a way, Danny, just to play devil's advocate, it also sounds exhausting. Like, wouldn't you guys get customer calls at home? Your dad would take calls?
Not too often at home, although I did get one at home on a Christmas day when the kids were getting ready to unwrap their presents because the lady had picked up a fresh turkey the day before that she had ordered, and it was bad. And I had to go, the store was closed, I had to go unlock the store, find a fresh turkey that somebody had failed to pick up the day before, and take it to her house. But that was pretty rare. Most of the complaints came right to headquarters. Back in the day, you got a lot of letters, snail mail complaints, but you also got phone complaints. And, of course, the whole idea of getting to those complaints real fast was huge. And I still have people say, boy, back in 1996, I called you called me back in a half hour, you got the produce guy on the phone with you, and the problem was solved. Yeah. And they remember that from 1996 because it's rare these days. But hopefully not at my clients.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of your clients, that's a great opportunity to talk about how someone can become a client. I want to remind our listeners and viewers, Danny O'Malia is my guest. He is Indy's Trusted Servant. The website is indystrustedservant.com. Danny also has a radio show that I've been on a few times.
And you're going to be on again.
Yeah, it's coming up. My episode is coming up Wednesday, September 26th. The show is always Wednesdays from 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m., right, Danny?
On 91.9 FM WITT.
Yes.
Or online at 919witt.org.
Oh, see, I learned something there. I didn't know that online listening was an option.
You
That's
can listen
pretty cool.
4:30 online as well.
Great.
Right up your alley.
Yeah, right. Well, so, I like to prepare for these talks. It's just fun. And I've shared with you before, I love history. And, of course, I mean, the O'Malley family is one of the more historic Indianapolis families, you'd have to say.
Thank you.
But in preparing for the talk today, Danny, when I think about you, one of the things that comes to mind, this is slightly different from culture, but I'm sure it's very similar, has similar roots. But I think you're a guy, you're a community person. I mean, you're involved in the community. Of course, I see you everywhere. Catholic Business Exchange meetings, One Zone. You're always promoting things like Cathedral, Xavier.
I'm a bit of a homer.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Just talk about how important community is to you.
Well, that's that's part of the O'Malley culture. Joe was always really big on, you got to support the people that are supporting you. I remember one of the early things, and I was still in college, when my dad opened his first store at 106th and College. The Carmel Dad's Club is a huge entity within Carmel. And that first or second Halloween he was open, he donated all the pumpkin sales to the Carmel Pups, which is a youth football. It might have been the Dad's Club. The Pups are part of the Dad's Club, so I don't know if it was the Pups or the Dad's Club, but oh my God, we sold a lot of pumpkins. And it just went from there. We always had an O'Malley, we started in Carmel. We always had O'Malley teams in the Little League with our jerseys and our logo on them. And that just continued to expand as we went to more stores. Now we're supporting Noblesville. Now we're supporting North Central, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And stuff in the community, we always wanted to support it. Dad was even a big brother when all of his kids got older, and his first two grandkids, my two oldest children, were little girls. He started missing having a little boy around, so he became a big brother. And we used to, buy a couple tables at the Big Brothers dinner. And I'm just throwing a few things out there, but we supported a lot of stuff. We were always the sponsor of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. We were always the sponsor of Irish Fest. Guess why? They're going to call us, so we better support it.
Again, in researching your background, one of my favorite things that I found, and I'm not going to be able to retrieve the name correctly, but the Irish Citizen Award that was 2015, right?
Irish Citizen of the Year. That is an award that the old Indianapolis Athletic Club, which is now condos, but they have a foundation that raises money to help kids, and they give an Irishman of the Year award, and that Irishman or Woman of the Year is the Grand Marshal of the parade.
Neat.
And the committee is all the people that have been Irish People of the Year award.
Yeah.
So my name came up, I guess, finally in 2015, and I had my whole family, all my daughters, grandkids, and so on and so forth on the float with me. It was a riot.
Neat. That's great.
It was a riot.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I think of you, from a practical point of view, I probably because I'm a business owner, one of the ways I think of you is, you help businesses with their customer service. And again, I would encourage anyone to reach out to Danny who wants help with this.
Appreciate it.
What do you say to the person who is not a business owner? Can we apply the kind of the teachings, let's say, of the O'Malley story, just as people?
Well, I think you can. Of course, Joe always pronounced his philosophy basically was if you do the right thing if you try to do the right thing for the right reason with everybody every time, you should be successful at whatever you do. Okay, so if everybody tries to do the right thing for the right reason every time, places will be easier to work at, right?
Yeah.
And some of the things are pretty basic. I'll tell you a quick story about one of my clients. One of my clients ran a local AM and FM radio stations. He had 20 employees. He said, I really got a problem. I got 20 employees. You would think it'd be easy for 20 people to work together. But I got the on-air talent. I got the salespeople. I got IT people. I got a couple of accountants, and I got a couple of events people. Now, he said, you would think the salespeople and the on-air talent would recognize that without each other, they're nothing. But they won't work together. Can you help me with that? I know you do teamwork. Can you help unravel that? Human nature, he says, the sales guy will throw an ad in front of the disc jockey with 5 minutes left in the show and expect him to read it. But he's already planned his show out. So maybe he reads it, but he gets mad. And now they're at each other's throats when they should just help each other out as much as they can and talk out in the community about each other as well as they can, because it's going to help you. People need to be reminded of that, in the work world. There's a lot of, we're all human beings and we all have our failings and our sensitivities, and some of us are a little less judicious about the way we speak to people. If everybody would just, again, try to do the right thing for the right reason with everybody every time, that would alleviate a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the message that I try to, spread when I'm talking to a group of employees at whatever place, is you're all really important to each other. And one of the other things I'll say is, in a hierarchical situation, which most businesses are, sometimes the least important employee is the most important employee. In a grocery store, that carryout person's really important. That might be the first and last person the customer sees, but that might be the lowest paid person in the company. But you got to make sure that person feels important, understands the importance of the job. And when that happens, that person is a goodwill ambassador.
That reminds me of the inverted Nordstroms pyramid, which I think I've seen in one of your presentations.
It's in the PowerPoint. It's upside down.
Yes.
They all ought to be upside down. They should have the customers on the top and the big shots on the bottom. And the people that take care of the customers, they should be right there next to the customers. And the people that run the company should be supporting the people taking care of the customers. That's what Nordstrom does.
Yeah.
And Nordstrom also tries to have very few rules. The one rule is use good judgment in all situations. So, they give refunds for stuff they don't even carry.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I read...
They've empowered their people.
Yes. It's funny. I read I'm sure I've shared this with you before. I read a history of Nordstroms, and of course, when you read a Nordstrom's history, you're going to see stories like someone brought in a pair of used tires to return. Of course, they never bought them at Nordstrom's, and Nordstrom's refunded. It's funny that just those stories made me a Nordstrom's customer.
Well, I'll tell you my favorite Nordstrom story. I hope we have time for this. Harried businessman runs into a mall at 5:30, suit and tie, goes to the Nordstrom store to the perfume counter. It's my wedding anniversary. I'm meeting my wife for an hour. I haven't done anything. Do you have Tony Val perfume? No, we don't, but how long are you going to be in the mall? I think I can find you some. Well, I got to go to the candy store and the florist. I'll be back here in 20 minutes. She says, I'll have it for you. She knows Macy's has it at the other end of the mall. She gets another girl to watch her counter for her. Teamwork, okay? Empowered employees. She hoofs down to the Macy's, buys the perfume, brings it back, wraps it, has it for him when he comes back. Now, the point is, he went to Nordstrom because he knew they'd dig him out somehow.
Yes.
Right? Macy's had the stuff. He didn't know that. but he figured his better bet was Nordstrom. Well, I call that being in the pole position, like the pole at the 500.
Yeah.
And Nordstrom's was in the pole position that night. That's where you want to be with the customer.
I'll share a story, a Prometheus story with you, just because you are who you are, and I think you would appreciate this. I heard a story secondhand just about something that happened with a client of ours. So a client had a big iMac computer. They did a bunch of video work on it and stuff, and it was getting old, and it had just slowed down. So they brought it in. They said, just replace it. I just want to. It's too slow. Just get me a new one. You guys recycle this one. Well, one of our employees took a look, and now a new one is going to be $3,000, something like that, big money. Took a look and said, if we just simply replace the hard drive with a faster type of hard drive, it would actually be just about like new, and $300 versus $3,000.
Fabulous.
Yes. And so that's what they did. Now, what's interesting, Danny, is this is just something I heard secondhand. It's interesting to almost reverse engineer, and I find myself asking, how did that happen? I'm very pleased that that's the type of employees we have.
You should be, but you deserve a lot of credit for A, hiring that type.
Yeah,
and
I suppose.
And B, empowering.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about empowerment. Nordstrom's very good at empowerment. You should never get in trouble for trying to take care of a customer. Now, you might make a mistake. You might overdo it with the refund or whatever. But if you're trying to take care of a customer, you're not going to get in trouble for it. And that's obviously the message you've got to your employees.
I suppose so. That reminds me of another one of your slides that says something like, having rules gives the employees reasons to say no to the customer.
That's why we hate rules. That's another Nordstrom thing.
That is right. Nordstrom.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You got to have some rules, obviously.
Sure. Well, Danny, I have listeners and viewers that would get on me if I didn't ask about how Shannon's boys are doing. So can you give us an update on how Connor and Danny are doing?
Well, thanks, Tony. As you may know, on my website, I have two videos. One of them is my initial interviews with you on Who's Your Hometown Heroes.
I've seen that.
The other is my speech that I do for free called Faith in the Face of Tragedy. And the speech is 3.5 years old. The tragedy was 4 years and 2 months ago now. And Connor and Danny, Shannon's two boys, as you may know, they've been... we're in the process of my youngest daughter, Colleen, and her husband, Doug, adopting them. But they are in the family with Colleen and Doug and their three little ones, Ryan, age 7, Maddie, age 5, and baby Shannon, age 3. And there's a great story about baby Shannon. She was born after the tragedy, and my son and daughter and son-in-law had decided to respect my wishes not to know the gender of the child. So they did not know themselves. And this was going to be my last grandchild of 8, probably. And they gave me that gift. And Danny, who was about, he's 12 now, so he was about 9 then, came to Colleen and said, if it's a girl, would you think of naming it Shannon? And this was, just a year after the tragedy. And she said, well, how would you and Connor feel about that? And he goes, I talked to Connor and he wants it too. And so she talked to the counselor, that they were going to. And they said, boy, if the boys are comfortable with that, well, you cannot believe the two boys with their they love Ryan and Maddie and they're great with them. But that little Shannon, they're fabulous with her. Connor's a freshman at Cathedral.
Wow, time flies.
It does. And Danny's a 7th grader at Louis de Montfort, so he's now my oldest grandchild in school there. Connor's a year behind his older cousin, Allison, who's a sophomore at Cathedral. That's my oldest daughter, Janet's daughter. So he's there with her, and they're doing marvelously well. Connor is playing baseball, fall baseball right now. He's a very good baseball player. I enjoy seeing him play a lot. And Danny is playing baseball and lacrosse still. And they're both doing very well. And I just have to say that the prayers that everybody has continued to offer. I saw at the Cathedral 100th anniversary event Saturday night a guy that was a year ahead of me who I had not seen since before the tragedy. And the first thing he said was, "I want you to know I've prayed for you every day." And so we feel that. And those prayers get to the boys, if you will. So they're doing well in school. They're great big brothers to their little cousins. And they've got friends from here to, to wherever. I was taking him and one of his friends to a Cathedral football game last week, and I was really getting to know the friend who was kind of new in the neighborhood. And I said, "How did you choose Cathedral over Garin, which is the Catholic school up in closer?" And he said, "Well, all my best buddies were going to Cathedral, and so that would include Connor. So they're doing great. And again, we could still use the prayers. I'm sure that I know they have their down moments, as we all do, but the community's been great to all of us, but especially to those two boys.
Yeah.
And my son-in-law and my daughter, don't know where we'd be without them.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific to get an update.
Thank you
we
for
all
asking.
think about you all quite a lot. I want to remind everyone, Danny O'Malia has been my guest. He is Indy's trusted servant. The website is indiestrustedservant.com. Check his radio show out, especially on September 26th, where yours truly will be a guest.
Tell him what you're going to talk about.
I'll be talking about email security. Lots
go.
of bad email stuff going around.
Yes, exactly.
The radio station is 91.9 WITT. His Danny show airs every Wednesday from 4:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Danny, thanks so much. It's great to catch up with you. Always great to see you.
Let me add, if anybody wants to talk to me about customer service and culture, 317-413-9062. Thanks for having me, Tony.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Danny.